because we're running pretty low on time. We're going to start, let me just start with the topic of the conversation, and then, which is the just energy transition and the role of Southeast Asian youth. And we're going to have some interesting speakers coming up to present both keynotes, some research findings, and then a panel afterwards. And we're going to start with some introductory remarks from EGAT, the Thailand's Energy Authority. What would you? Or กี่คนที่นั่งอยู่อะค่ะ4 คนนะคะ If you guys want to just go sit up there, all good too. Up to you.
How is it working? Because I saw lots of people on the session, but there's only 4 chairs, and I know I'm making remarks in the next.
So first we're going to present this video, and then you're making the remarks, and then there's Henry who's remote.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Natalie is also going to be remote. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, you're changing the file?
Oh, no, because Nata asked me to shorten it, so I'm not sure if that's...
Oh, I sent him the long one, I think. Can you just skip over some?
Yeah, sure.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. สวัสดีค่ะ อรุณสวัสดิ์ Hello, everybody. My name is Jitsai Santaputra. I am the head of the Thai youth delegation here this year at COP28. We have a very exciting panel for everyone today. It's about the just energy transition and the role of youth, but also we'd also want to expand that to what the roles of non-youths can do for us as well, and how do we go together and go very far, but we're going to go all together and leave no one behind. So I would first off start with a introductory video and a keynote speech from EGAT, which is the Electricity Generating Authority of Thailand. And then it will be followed by our youth keynote speaker, which is Mr. Akhil Kalander. I will ask him up very soon. But first, I would like all our panelists to be seated on the stage. Could I please have our panelists on the stage, please? Yes. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, and we have some panelists joining from online, so right now it's just the two. Can we get you two in the middle? Is that okay? Yeah, Okay, so without further ado, because I know we're running really late, we will start with the EGAT's opening speech, and then followed by the youth speech. Thank you.
เสียงมันไม่ออกเนี่ย
A bit of a technical difficulty. Please bear with us.
Generation provider, and this will be building throughout Thailand together with taking good care of the environment and sustain social community. I would like to introduce about Myanmar Smart City project, a city journey towards net zero city. First of all, what is Myanmar? Myanmar is the small district of Lambang province in the northern part of Thailand. Located in an area, IGAT created the 47th.
Due to technical difficulties, we will go straight to the youth keynote speech. I'm so excited to welcome Mr. Akhil Kalander. His profile is so long, so I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I'm so happy that he's here today with us from Sustainable Energy for All. I'll give it over to Akhil. Thank you.
Thanks, Jitsai. It's a pleasure to be here today with everyone. My name is Akhil Kalander. Thank you so much for having me at the Thailand Pavilion. And as a representative of SE for All, I hope that this is an indicator of more work that we want to do in the region. So for those of you that don't know, SE for All, or Sustainable Energy for All, is a UN partner organization that was founded back in 2012 by the then UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Kanda Yumkella, with the focus of making sure that SDG 7, clean, reliable, modern, and affordable energy for all, is at the forefront of the SDG agenda as it underpins so many other SDGs. My role at SE for All is as the youth specialist. So I'm basically responsible for ensuring that young people between the ages of 18 to 35 have access to opportunities, access to meaningful employment, access to education, capacity building, and high-level platforms for dialogue, basically a seat at the table with everything to do with SDG 7. So when Jitsai invited me here today, I realized that it was a really good opportunity to share from our side a bit about what we do and why why youth inclusion is so important in the work that we do, and also how this can be extended to, well, one, the other youth in the room, so that the youth from Southeast Asia can understand their role, and then also to leaders and policymakers that might be wondering, how do we get youth more involved in the work? So the first point that I want to make is really directed at just the youth and people in general who wonder about the importance of youth inclusion. We often hear about the arguments for urgency. Youth really want clean energy transitions, fossil fuel phase out, climate change mitigation to happen, because for us it is an existential crisis. It is something that the decisions made now will basically determine the world that we live in down the road, and so we see it as a key priority. We also bring innovation to the table, and I don't mean this in that we come up with creative projects and stuff. No, youth are very technically sound, We are oftentimes the most recent graduates and therefore have access to the most recent developments in the space, in science and technology, in processes and procedures, and can bring these to the table. And we don't necessarily have the lock-in of years of process that might prevent us from seeing the wider lens and understanding that things can be done in a different and more effective and more sustainable way. And this is a massive value add that involving youth into decision-making, into processes and planning can bring. And then we also have resilience and inclusivity. Youth are strong advocates for inclusivity. They recognize that the issues related to the way that we've done things historically and the top-down approaches that have been kind of employed over years past that have led to the systems that we have in place today that don't really include underrepresented groups, be it women, youth, and indigenous people. And these are things that need to change for us to actually have sustainable solutions. And so these are some key areas where we can include youth. And they're a huge voice. I think in Southeast Asia, the median age is 29 years old. So that there's a huge point in bringing in youth voices to solution making. So how do we do this? And this is more focused towards the leaders and decision makers, but I welcome the youth in the room to also use this in your advocacy when you are having discussions, if you have access to these platforms. And the first of this is advocacy, actually. There is a need for more awareness. Before I came onto the stage, I had the chance to speak with a lot of youth leaders or some of the youth leaders from the region, from the Philippines, from Thailand. I have a lot of conversations with Jitsai from Indonesia and ask them if, the challenges that we face in SE for All, where we might put out a call for applications for capacity building, for an ambassador program, for education, are the same that they might face. We put out these calls, but we just don't have enough youth applying from the region. There's a paucity, it was basically the same. There's a recognized gap in the number of Southeast Asian youth that are involved in the energy space, that are feeding into these discussions and that see the opportunities or the pathways that they can use to get involved. And for us to start to change these gaps and to close them, we need to also have data. We need to actually have the collection and the use of data that is collected by or on behalf of youth, and that can inform the decisions and the work that we do in the space, that can inform policy, that can inform decision making. And so this is a really good way that youth can get involved, but a good way that policymakers can start to move the needle and ensure meaningful youth engagement, because data-driven decision making needs to be data-driven. The second is professional development. There's so many times where I have spoken to youth who have the technical capacity, who have the drive, who have the ambition, who have the know-how, but lack access to resources, be it finance, be it capacity building, mentorship, all the things that you would need to take, be it whether it's a business solution to move it from concept to an actual tangible product, or at least a minimum viable product, be it a youth-led project for social impact. We don't have the mentorship or the guidance or the networks to get it to where it needs to be. And this is in a lot of cases due to a lack of an enabling environment in many countries that supports youth-led projects and that supports opportunities to bring them to the front, And this is where bringing youth into these decision-making processes or forming these kinds of advisory groups that can help to dictate the creation of this enabling environment is really important, and a really good angle that leaders can take to start to bridge these gaps and get youth involved. And then capacity building is also the other side. Many youth who actually have the desire to get involved in the sector are also competing for limited opportunities for education and for training to get involved. Energy is highly technical, but I think the latest report from the IEA was that there's a need for 30 million new jobs in clean energy if we are to achieve net zero by 2050. These are not energy transition jobs. These are not just transition jobs, for example, from fossil fuel workers to the clean energy sector. These are new jobs that need technical capacity, from all over the world, and we're already at a lack of technical, we're at a deficit of technical capacity for the energy sector. And so this is a really good way to get youth engaged, because you have a chance through education, policy, through these different means, to actually start to train youth to enable a just transition, to start to train youth to enable the energy transition, to close energy access gaps, to move the needle on clean cooking. And this is a really, really good way that we can start to do it from the ground up by getting youth involved at an early stage. Time about how SE for All is doing this. On the advocacy side, we have we changed the perception that the youth category are just children who can come up on a stage and advocate for XYZ, but can't actually. But many of the youth in this room work in the sector and are technical, but this is not recognized in the wider status. So we aim to build their capacity to communicate these messages and then provide them with access to high-level platforms, to policymakers, to decision makers, to leaders. And we can see that JISA has been doing an excellent job of this so far. On the capacity building side, maybe not focused in Southeast Asia yet, but we hopefully can expand programs like this. We have an Open Africa Power program where each year we provide between 100 to 150 youth with technical, holistic power sector training delivered by universities in Africa and Italy in partnership with the Enel Foundation. And this has resulted in some of the most amazing youth energy leaders in Africa who are really well trained to contribute to the sector at all levels, be it policy, be it the technical side, engineering, you name it. And we're looking for more programs like this that can enable youth to have access to this capacity building and just basically work with the institutions that already exist. We're not reinventing the wheel. It's more about convening the different actors to put purposeful solutions forward. And then finally, the last one that I'd like to touch on is the opportunity that exists with building of infrastructure. So we know that we need to roll out clean energy technologies on a massive scale to get to where we need to be by 2050. We realize that another way that is maybe not necessarily through university, but through on-the-job training, is to give youth the exposure on infrastructure projects. How can they shadow? How can they train with developers to actually gain this experience? So through our Powering Healthcare program that is focused on electrifying last year 6 hospitals in Sierra Leone, we gave the chance for 10 young women to get involved and actually shadow the developers and learn on the job for a 6-month period. And I think right now, 80% of these have gone on to work in the energy sector straight out of the bat. And we know that like there's also an issue with women in STEM and opportunities for women in STEM. So this is another way that we can use a model that we can use for infrastructure projects where we have development happening, where we have solar energy technologies, wind energy technologies, like just clean energy on the whole, being installed and developed, where we can bring youth in and provide this on-the-job training as another angle that may not work in the sense that where there is not the opportunity for education or capacity building in another way. So there are opportunities to get youth involved in major projects, programs, and initiatives. I know that we're short on time, so I just want to close there and really leave the call to action for the leaders who might be listening online. How can you really start to integrate youth meaningfully into the discussions that you have, into your decision making, into your policy making? We do have a contribution to make. We do have the technical knowledge, but the support is needed, and the youth are keen, and they have that sense of urgency and ambition to move the needle. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Hello? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Akil. Thank you so much for that information. We'll now go next to the next part, which is going to be a presentation by Endri. He's joining us online, and he has a very packed schedule. So respectfully, Endri, if you can hear us, we are about to put you on the screen. Endri will be presenting a project by Youth for Energy in Southeast Asia, collaboration with ASEAN Youth Organization Research Center, AYO Recent. Endri, your screen is now on the your screen is now being shown in the pavilion as well. So I will, without further ado, I will let Andrew take it away. Thank you.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Just don't start yet. We're just checking audio for a second.
All right.
Andrew, can you say something?
Yes, I'm speaking right now. Can you hear me?
Okay, perfect. Okay, audio's in. We can start. Thank you.
Okay. I've been looking at the time right now. I think I'm just going to do a quick introduction of our project here. So it's called Project Clean Future. So what we're going to present today is on the ASEAN Youth Energy Outlook. I think the key thing here that we want to say and really putting people as the most important asset for energy transition or a transition towards a cleaner tomorrow. I think it's really acting together now to shape tomorrow. So I'm Andre. I'm the Research Director for Youth for Energy, Southeast Asia itself. The presentation today, I'm going to split it into three parts. The first part is we're going to look at the regional analysis, what are the insights that we got from a regional level. And then we're going to zoom in into a country level. What does youth thoughts and perception towards certain things, and then we're going to deep dive into what are youth willing to do individually, right? So it's more of a collective perspective of how we can do things together. Okay. Now I'm just gonna dive right in. So regional level insights. So just to paint the picture, I think important thing over here that we want to say is when we look at ASEAN as a whole, as a demographic itself, we should harness the demographic dividend that we have, right? When we look at youth itself, it's about 50% of the population. And when we look at the energy outlook in ASEAN itself, the demand, the supply, the installed capacity, it's all going to be increased threefold, fourfold, right? So those are the key case for change that we need to then be very aware of, right? And this necessitates why youth would need to play a bigger role because youth are the tomorrow for ASEAN itself, right? So now as we deep dive a little bit into what youths believe, 70% of youth believe that regional cooperation in ASEAN region is imperative and important, right, to advance clean energy adoption. Now, when we say that youth believe that regional cooperation is important, but as we deep dive into it, less than half of the youth respondent itself is of the opinion that ASEAN as a region, we are adequately prepared to embrace the transition towards clean energy. Right. So through our survey itself, only 38% of youth feel that ASEAN is adequately prepared. Now, this is something that is quite low and something that we would need to then look for either from policy level, from government level, how do we then address this, right? Of which, out of the 38% of, and based on the youth populations that we have, many felt that there is a lack of clear goal and vision. So only 41% of the youth feels that ASEAN has a clearly defined vision and goals in addressing climate change, right? So 38% of the youth feels that we are ready. And I think this stems on because there's no clarity in terms of vision and goal, right? And when we deep dive further, what does the youth identify as the top three biggest barrier? Number one, lack in government political view itself. Number two, gaps in regulatory and policy framework. And number three, lack of intergovernmental cooperation. So these three are the top three biggest barrier that was identified as the challenges in achieving an ASEAN-wide clean energy transition. So we asked a series of 9 different questions, and this three stands out the most. So something for the panel to discuss and talk about later on, right? Now, as I deep dive into the country level insights, now what does the youth feel about their country itself? Are the country doing enough? Is the policymakers putting enough emphasis on things such as policy, training, investment, education, awareness? Those are areas that we're going to cover in the country level insights. Now, as an overall, 8 out of 10 youth respondents believe that it is imperative for the country to have a decarbonization target, right? So youth believe that country needs to have a target that we need to aspire towards and act upon it immediately. So through our survey, 80% of youth feels that it's important. Now, when we look at it, although 80% of the youth feels that we should have a clear target and a clear decarbonization target and we should work towards it, however, 87% of youth are concerned about the pollution and emission that is caused by the current energy system itself. And to address this, youth believe that the primary responsibility in reducing greenhouse gas emission rests with the government and private sector itself, right? So this is a collation of two different reports, and where we see here is that government and private sector is where the youths are looking towards to collaborate, to work with together, to actually drive and address a lot more of the climate change initiative and actions. Now, we did the same thing about what are the top 3 barriers for the country to achieve a sustainable energy transition. And what we realize here is, number 1, government political view to prioritize clean energy policies is one of the key barriers. And number 2, economic financial constraints. And the third biggest one is facilitative and enabling policies. Now, what do we mean by economic conditions and constraints? These are mainly areas where government are not prioritizing investments, are not prioritizing their efforts onto clean energy, right? Third one, facilitative and enabling policies. How do we make sure that the ecosystem is ready? How do we make sure that we align and we line up the investors, we line up our initiative to enable clean energy transition, clean energy investment, energy relevant industry training? Those are the key things that we need to deep dive further. So what we see from the survey itself, 80% of the youth believe that their country has not invested enough in energy infrastructure. Now, energy infrastructure here, 2 parts, right? A lot of us feels that green energy, clean energy is always about renewable energy. But on the other hand, it's about the fuel or energy that should not have been generated in the first place, which is energy conservation and improving energy efficiency. So these two plays a hand in hand, where you don't want to increase, or you don't want your energy generation or energy demand to be increasing threefolds, right? You try to reduce the demand itself, and this is a two-pronged approach in how we're gonna manage energy transition moving forward. So 80% of the youth believe that we have not invested enough in energy infrastructure. Now, besides that, youths also feel that government are falling short in their efforts on education, as well as creating awareness on climate change. Now, only 79% of the youth itself feels that government is not putting enough emphasis on it, right? And 84% of youth believe that there is a lack of industry relevant skills training. Now, it's not only about education and awareness, and then as we deep dive and say, what kind of education, what kind of awareness that you need? Actually, there are even more youth believe that there is not enough industry relevant skills training. And I think that is why private sector as well as other organizations needs to play a bigger role in some of these things, right? So we covered the regional insights, we covered the country insights. Now we deep dive a little bit into the individual level insights. So what we're going to talk about over here is essentially, what are youth people, me and you, sitting down? I mean, this is the last year of me being a youth, but anyway, what are we willing to do, right, to spur clean energy transition? Now, the good thing is, youth intend to embrace eco-conscious habits and lifestyle for a sustainable future. That's for sure, right? And it's undeniable that
over 90% of youth intend to change their habit and adopt a sustainable lifestyle, right? So youth are willing to do so. However, right, when we look at electric vehicle, that's the in thing right now, right? A lot of investment coming in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Singapore. You see Tesla coming in, making grounds and stuff. BYDs coming in. So youth intend for their future vehicle to be an electric vehicle, right? So when we ask in the survey itself, youth are willing to switch towards electric vehicle, and it is their preferred choice of vehicle. However, affordability as well as charging infrastructure or basic infrastructure becomes a question. So there are youth, and half of this 84% is willing to do so, but is concerned because of the lack of a ready ecosystem and charging infrastructure. So that is something where we're going to detail further in our full report, but this is a high level where we are looking at, right? Now, in terms of public transportation, now, majority of youth are committed to adopt public transportation as their primary mode of travel. Now, 77% of youth are saying that they are willing to do so. Now, the caveat here is that, number one, they are willing to do so in their country. However, a lot of them realize that there is no first mile, last mile for them to do so. Number two is that it's so inconvenient that they rather pollute and commute to work or to school or to university. So there are structural changes and foundational changes that we as youth need to push for, right? At the end of the day, those are things that we want for the future, is areas that we should advocate for, right? And when we look at volunteerism, now, as organization, I'm sure all of you sitting there, you are looking at and you're volunteering in one way or another. And youth are very energetic, and we should capitalize on that, right? So 53% of youth are interested to pursue energy-related volunteerism. And this is a good thing, right? It suits what we need to do, right? We need to put in the energy, the passion, and the thought that we have to craft the future that we want. So I think these are some of the key things that we would need to talk about in the individual level. So what's next, right? I think for youth, just to close this off, I think we should act now to shape tomorrow together. And I'm sure there are some of you who are thinking, it's very high level. I think now the full report is going to be out. This side is on the ground over there. I think those are areas where we are working together with different stakeholders to try to bring a lot more insights into what does the youth, the ASEAN youth thinks, right? Because of a very unique demographic of youth that we have over here. A little bit of disparity in terms of maturity of how different countries are thinking and adapting towards it. But I think if we act together, we get our act together, we are one of the biggest population that will be able to push for a cleaner tomorrow. So thank you. Follow our socials, Youth for Energy Southeast Asia, as well as ASEAN Youth Organization. Thank you. Over to you.
Hello. Okay. Thank you so much, Andre, for the wonderful presentation. Yep. We'll bring a bit of the information and get some more feedback from our lovely panelists in the room and also joining us online, Natalie, quite soon. But before then, we'll have two short presentations from people who are doing the work in their countries. We'll have Zagi present his work in Indonesia first. Now, this model for Society for Renewable Energy in Indonesia has been very inspiring for my own organization when I started Youth for Energy in Southeast Asia. So I'm very happy today to have Zagi here in person in our pavilion. We'll let him share it, and then we'll have Tonic from the Philippines, who I've recently met through our connections, who are actually here. Jasper, thank you for being here with us, who's doing amazing, amazing work on the ground in the Philippines as well. So first off, I'll give it to Zagi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the beautiful opportunities to speak at the Thai Pavilion. Actually, our pavilion is quite near Indonesia and Thailand. I'm very glad that we have connected. So my name is Zagia Kanaberian. I'm a founder of Society of Renewable Energy, a youth organization that focuses to tackle the climate change and also accelerate the energy transition within the youth capacity building and also multi-institutional collaboration. So basically, we are established in 2019 when I was in student university at the third year student. So I was thinking about how can youth can contribute and which platform that we can collect together our initiative and knowledge, and especially the previous speakers from the SE4O and also from the Asian Youth for Energy is really have a good idea about the analysis about the landscape of the youth itself from the global perspective and also from the region perspective. So I will echoing what can be we translate from the global region into the grassroots level. So basically, we are trying to accommodate the youth that has capability, the youth that has knowledge in order to apply the technology itself. So when we talk about the just energy transition, we talk about the access for the energy in order in for the rural area. So in Indonesia, we have 270 million people, and we have 70,000 islands. You can imagine how far and how difficult we can give an equal opportunities for all people in Indonesia to access for the energy. So absolutely, this year, we have 197 villages that have not electrified yet. Basically, our organization aims to accelerate the energy transition with a just manner. So we want to collect all the stakeholders within the pentahelix model. We collaborate with the government, private sectors, finance institution, local community, and also with the media. Don't forget to bring the media into the pentahelix model, because the media can amplify our action, because action over the words. When we have an action, a concrete action, we have to amplify into the public. So we mapping the several media from the high level and mainstreaming social media. And after that, we collect the youth movement from across the nation. This year, we actually built the solar PV into more than 60 locations with total capacity 150. In each location, we have various capacity, 3 to 7 kilowatt peak. You can imagine, in Indonesia, we got a chance to increase our GDP within 1% if we give the energy access for the rural area, because they have a lot of nature solution. They have a lot of potential in order to economic and also for the healthcare and also for the MSMEs. So the youth certified by the government, and then they can spread across the nation to build the solar PV itself. And the solution is quite it's expensive, but no need to worry. We have innovative solution. We have a blended solution. We gather the CSR budget and also the international donors budget to give the capacity building and also the infrastructures. So in order to give the sustainable program, we have to give the capacity building goes hands in hands with the local community, and all the solution comes from the youth-led initiative. And from that, I agree with the several previous speakers. We have to give the platform for the youth to action, to gather the voices, and also speaks to the senior level for the acts together between the senior level and also for the youth. And in my country, we have target net zero emission by 2060. You can imagine, 30 years from now, I will be 62 years old, and I can remember I speak in the Thai Pavilion when I was in COP28, and at that time I celebrate the net zero emission goals in our country. So basically, the youth is already excited to be part of the net zero emission solution, and how can we collaborate together and give the trust for us in order to translate from the planning into the execution strategies. Maybe that's all from me. Thank you so much, Jitsai.
Thank you, Zagi. And up next, we will have Tonic present her presentation. Her work is in the Philippines, and I'm so excited to finally get to see the full presentation up close here at COP28. Thank you. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm too short for the mic anyway.
So first of all, thank you, Jitsai, for your amazing work in your regional connecting of youth. It's a very important platform that brings forward the vulnerabilities of what Southeast Asia is already. Just hold on. Of what Southeast Asia is already experiencing and how youth are moving together for it. So let me bring you first to the Philippines, sharing a bit of how youth is able to influence just energy transition into what we're doing. So next slide, please. Our organization, Reboot Philippines Renewable Energy Transition Institute, is a youth-powered organization advocating for the Philippine just energy transition towards renewable energy. And it's youth-powered because it doesn't just engage with youth. It ensures that there is space for youth in the conversation, but it makes sure that when we are proceeding with what we are doing, it talks about the larger sectors, the larger members of our society, for us to be able to pave the way of how we can transition together. So, very briefly, we are present in the 3 major land groups of the Philippines, Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. Our current project sites are spread all throughout. The gender component in making sure that whoever we engage with follows a 1:1.1 ratio. Vision basically is for a just and democratic transition to 100% RE. And how we do this is through the energy leadership and acknowledging that it isn't just certain sectors that can be part of the conversation, but a transdisciplinary approach so that we can address the urgency of the climate crisis. And running you through each of our work streams, next slide please. First is we focus on developing knowledge products on the just energy transition. Its formal name is CEL, Climate and Energy Literacy. So it's mainstreaming just energy transition in formal, informal, and non-formal education, engaging with our Department of Education, with different institutions, bringing it into the ground, ensuring that when we talk about the just energy transition, it doesn't just get cornered into the technical aspect of it, but how energy or electricity relates to everybody. Next slide, please. Our second work stream is on how we train youth to lead JET advocacies. The formal term for this is SEAL, which is Skills in Environment and Energy Advocacy and Leadership. This is our capacity building and youth empowerment aspect. So this ensures that it isn't just a one-off webinar or one-off training aspect. It's a long-term capacity building that really follows the different aspects of the environmental, technical, and social aspects of what goes into the discussion in just energy transition. Next is for the work stream on how we influence policies and programs for just energy transition. The formal name for this is Youth Empowered Spaces, or YES. So this basically ensures the sustainability of the capacity building activities is partnered with an institutionalized lobbying for campaigns or policies that are specific to the context of the different areas. Since as an archipelago, we have very different issues and different ways of how it could be influenced in that specific space. And ensuring that it's the local youth in these areas that get to define on what spaces they're able to come into. This also falls on how earlier this year we've organized with the Youth for Just Transition, which I'll touch upon a bit later, the local conference of youth, which espouses the same values of how different youth from different areas can come together and self-define basically how they'd want to do and continue climate action in their area and map their own networks and how they can how can they can do it through their own capacity. Next, please. And for the last area, it's we mobilize local network to maintain JET action. So the formal name for this is JETX, Just Energy Transition X, similar to like a TEDx, because what we aim to do here is for us to localize the discussion on just energy transition and the formation of regional hubs to ensure that there's geographic and sectoral representation in the climate and energy movement. So it's through the efforts and through the ideas of what these community-based renewable energy projects is able to develop on what is applicable in their area and who they can mobilize within their own networks into making sure that it creates a ripple effect and doesn't just end with a certain project's timeline or a certain funder's goals. And very briefly, as I mentioned a while ago, next slide please. We're also a co-convener for the Youth for Just Transition Network. And what this is basically, next slide please, acknowledging that for us to talk about mainstreaming just transition, it requires a shift in the energy and climate policies, but should also focus that this should be just, democratic, and leaves no one behind. So since it started very early in 2021, it's been able to lobby national resolutions to be able to include just transition into the national framework and how youth are able to be part of this discussion. And espousing the true nature of what just transition should be. Next slide, please. It's composed of different member organizations that aren't just working within the energy sector. We have members from unions, we have members from media organizations, we have members from student-based, even from the government, in ensuring that just transition isn't just a discussion that are those currently involved within the climate space, but something that should be the responsibility of everybody in making sure how we get there. So that's it for who we are, what we're doing, and hopefully, if we can talk about how similar efforts are going forward in your country and navigating the discussion on just energy transition, especially from the youth championing how to get there, it's always an interesting discussion considering the technicalities and how new it is in the space that we're working at. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tonic, for the presentation. So now we finished the presentation section of our session, and the next part will be a panel discussion between the panelists. We have Zagi and Tonic in person. We have also Natalie Go joining us online. She is the president of Student Energy National University of Singapore, but I'll let her introduce herself when it's her turn. But I would be, due to the short time frame and the delays, I'll ask the first question to Zagi, as he may have to go off and escort the minister. So from the presentation that Andrea so kindly shared with us, one of the regional insights is that the youths identified a lack in government political will. That was the highest rated barrier of the barriers that were asked in achieving ASEAN-wide energy clean transition. So maybe speaking on the Indonesia perspective, on the youth end, and the people you work with and the people that you've supported in your programs, this lack of political will from the government to prioritize clean energy policies. Can you please speak a little bit about that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a really tough question from me. Especially the government of Indonesia already declared our national target within the 2060 to achieve the net zero emission from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, and also from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. We also enhance our national determined contribution from the 29 into 32% with business as usual, but from the international cooperation, we can leverage our potential into 41% in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. And the the barriers of the government to implement the clean energy transition is for the blended finance solution and also for the technological aspect. In Indonesia, we have several technology that collaborate with the other countries. But in order to implement the program itself, we have to synergize with the finance institution. How can we bring the finance into the table? Because regarding the JETP, regarding the global environmental fund, we don't know. It's just a number of the finance, like 20 billion US dollar and so on. But when we ask about the implementation, the bureaucracy is really difficult. And for the youth perspective, we want to engage with several stakeholders in that collaboration. We want to, to trying to shorten the bureaucracy and get easier in order to implement the program. And from the youth perspective also, we ask the government to give our platform to align with the national target, but we have to translate into the grassroots level, and we can bring the solution into community. So the clean energy already pushed by the youth, young generation, but in a concrete manner. We talk about the numbers of the capacity and the numbers of the reduction of the greenhouse gas emission, and we discuss with intergenerational dialogue. We ask them that the youth already create a solution. How can we synergize together? How can we leverage from the small into the big scales? And we already get the solution, but when we can collaborate, and this is the time, we have to act now. Maybe that's all the answer for the question. Thank you so much, Jitsai.
Thank you, Zagi. I'll throw the next question to Natalie here. The second most voted answer from the top 3 biggest barriers to achieving an ASEAN-wide clean energy transition is the gaps in regulatory and policy framework. Now, from your work, can you tell us a little bit about that? Can you maybe expand perhaps the Singapore perspective or the Singaporean youth perspective to that topic? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here to share the Singapore perspective. I think something about Singapore is that we already have a kind of framework in mind to look at energy, and therefore these kinds of things of gaps is still something that's kept within the government, and that's something that I think youth in Singapore are quite concerned about in terms of the lack of ability to be involved in these kinds of discussions and to even understand the gaps or what the government is doing to address these kinds of regulatory frameworks. So something that I can't really comment much on, but I can share more about in terms of what they have a framework, but they're not openly disclosing it, and there's also not a lot of youth engagement. So I think it brings us back to the point of the importance of youth in a just energy transition.
Yeah, Natalie, thank you so much. Just so everybody here is aware, can you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about what Student Energy at NUS does?
Yeah, sorry about that. So Student Energy at NUS, we are a student chapter of the Global Youth-led Student Energy Network, which is basically an organization that seeks to lead the next generation in accelerating the clean energy transition. So what we kind of do is that we are based in the university, the National University of Singapore, and we equip undergraduates with the skills and the knowledge and the opportunities, to contribute to the clean energy transition, be it in terms of industry exposure or knowledge building. So we're trying to kind of, address a certain gap in terms of youth not really knowing and not really understanding about the energy transition, and also not really, exploring and engaging in the opportunities that are open in this whole space. Yeah.
Thank you. Now back into the room with Tonic. Sadly, Zagi had to leave as he had other commitments to do. But to Tonic, I wanted to ask your thoughts on, also the regional insights, right? So is there a lack of political will from your experience, and what do you think is the solution? What are your recommendations to, say, the Philippine government, to the Thai government, in terms of how do we do the clean energy transition and how do you do it well?
So for our context, actually, it's quite commendable that we've had very early laws, particularly like Renewable Energy Act of 2008. Back when the discussions around it still isn't as popular as it is now, we've had introductions of those and how it gets implemented in our country. However, as it's 2023, the real question is on the access of what these laws entail, being able to make sure that it isn't just geared towards the private sector or geared towards investors, and also on making it clear how implementation can come in. Since, we've had a lot of, a plethora actually of very progressive ordinances, laws relating to not just for energy but for climate action as a whole. But it's always a question of implementation, who's policing and ensuring that what happens here really is something that could drive forward the transition that everybody can be involved in. And I guess one of the key things that could really come out of something that isn't touched upon in research that we'd like to see is on localized narrative-based perception of how, at the youth perspective, how far is it in terms of understanding the relationship of the policies that are in place, or even at a fundamental level of at a curriculum level of how you're able to relate the climate crisis and energy as a sector, because these are one of the things that we found out in our own study, that if it's a discussion on environmentalism and climate action, it's usually tree planting or beach cleanup, but the relationship of it to energy is usually a disconnect, seeing energy as more of a school topic rather than a direct one of the highest emissions that contributes to the climate crisis. So having those baselines integrated really puts it into perspective on what intergenerational conversations can do, and especially going into what's institutionalized at the moment, which is curriculums and climate education.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I really do agree. I feel like when we discuss with youth engagement in terms of climate, a lot of it just goes to tree planting. And we know some Thai corporates here also find that how do we go beyond that? How do we have that meaningful engagement with youth? That's great for the climate and great for everybody else. So my next question would be on the youth insights from Andrew's presentation about capturing the energetic youths and capitalizing on volunteerism. So from our respondents, we saw that 53% of them are interested to pursue energy-related volunteerism. Now, what Natalie does, what Youth for Energy in Southeast Asia does, and what your organization does, there's a lot of volunteering involved, right? We're not getting the amount of funding that we'd hope to get to really drive that energy transition, especially youth-led energy transition activities. So I would just ask you both our panelists, to speak a little bit about, that your audience or the people that you talk to who really want to engage with your organizations and really want to pursue energy-related volunteerism. What drives them? If you have discussed with them, is it their universities, their family, is it their circumstances? So really kind of help paint a picture for the people here in terms of like what type of people are engaging in your organizations that you are leading. I'll just throw this one to Tonic first and then to Natalie. Thank you.
So how we go about actually the entire foundation of Reboot Philippines is treating discussions on energy or climate action based on what issues are available in your locality. So less of us painting paving the way of what activities you should do and what you should join in, but rather having the support in terms of modules, in terms of small resources, basically enabling how you yourself can be able to gather people within your own network, within your own space, and then getting guidance on the foundation on that through what we've learned in the past or through our other networks as well. And usually this gives a varied level of audience. So we've worked with women who are working in agriculture, women in cooperatives, fishermen, fisher folks, farmers. It also goes into your more traditional discussions of students, young professionals that are just interested in trying to get to see how they can be more involved when it comes to volunteerism. So ensuring that it's grounded on the principles of what they'd want to do for their surroundings rather than what you can offer physically or monetarily makes the ownership of being able to contribute to climate action theirs rather than being the sole reason, the organization being the sole reason why they'd want to volunteer in the first place.
Really like that. Do what the people there on the ground want rather than trying to force what options you have and make them conform to that. So I think I really like that note. I'll throw it to Natalie joining us online.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. So maybe I can talk more about the universities and young youths who are looking to explore energy. I think in general, we see two groups of people. One of them are more technical based. So maybe they come from an engineering or science background and they study energy at school. So maybe that's something that, they do in terms of classes and lectures and, volunteering with our organization. They are there to kind of see how energy is, seen in the real world. What are some of the industries and career opportunities, and also to see how it plays into the bigger picture of the climate transition. And then this also links to the other group of students that we see, people who are really interested in the environment, in the just energy transition, in a sustainable energy transition, and then thinking about how best they can contribute in terms of focusing on energy, which is, we know, it's one of the biggest mitigation topics that we need to, act on in the world. And so, combining these two, I think this is what I think my organization is focusing on in terms of bringing energy as a topic that, it's important to everybody, regardless of your background. It's important because, we are all, going through this energy transition. Energy impacts everybody. And I think highlighting this, in terms of energy being both a technical subject, it requires technical expertise, but it also requires other types of skills and knowledge. And I think this is something where everyone can play a part, and that's something that we also put across to our members.
Thank you so much for your insights. Now we're running out of time. I know there's a lot of things that can be said about energy transition and youth engagement, but I'd like to bring Andri back into the Q&A part, and I want to throw we've discussed a lot about the barriers, but now we want to look a bit more positively. From the report, 70% of youths believe that regional cooperation in ASEAN is important to advance the energy adoption, clean energy adoption. Now, from your perspective, I'll throw this question to Andri first. What is it that you want to see that cooperation look like? Is it youth and governments? Is it civil society? Is it corporates? What type of sectors? Or if you want to talk about more of the educational dimension. So really, we'll bring this question out very broadly about the cooperation in ASEAN region. So I'll go with Andri first.
I think that there are a few areas and levels that we want to look at, right? I think number one, in terms of education and awareness, I think that's where platforms like this makes a lot of sense, right? Platform like this would be able to help different organizations, be it youth, be it NGOs, to actually work together and leverage on each other's strength. Now, you don't have to reinvent the view on different countries across ASEAN, but really leverage on what are the different things that, for example, Student Energy has done, Reboot Philippines have done, and some other organization like Youth for Energy, Southeast Asia, right? How can we then work together towards, working in silo is not going to help anyway, right? So I think at that level itself, I think we should work together. And then as we go a step further, right, I think as we go on to regional cooperation, how do we then effectively nudge policymakers, right? Now, at some point, we need to go and nudge the policymakers collectively. And why do you want to do that collectively? Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of the policymakers as well as the leaders are someone who are elected into office, right? And our interest as the people of the country itself plays a very huge role in terms of what are the priorities that we, as youth, as the citizens of the country would want, right? I think that would send the right message on how clean energy should be prioritized moving forward. And collectively, that's where we work together and nudge respective policymakers and see how we can use platforms like this. I mean, Natalie is from Singapore, I'm from Malaysia, you're from Thailand. Then we have Tony from Philippines. We are working together in it. And this is a perfect example of how do we start from the grassroots and then start advocating for the right things and then push together collectively for the clean energy agenda. I think that's my on top of my mind for now. Yep.
Thank you, Andre. I'll throw this one to Tonic. So cooperation, what does that look like? What is it you want to see, especially for your organization and for the Philippines?
So being part of the youth sector is inherently a vulnerability because it's a minority when it comes to the voice discussing just energy transition. But having regional cooperation moves that advocacy into a larger movement that goes beyond what your respective countries are just experiencing. And having that ASEAN outlook actually gives us a foundation of what are the things that can be compared across each country, and more importantly, how different is it that each country is responding to it. Because it transformed the narrative of youth being the vulnerable victims of circumstance into youth as the ones championing in making sure that just energy transition happens in their respective areas. And if that can happen in respective country scale, what more as a region, as an ASEAN region as a whole, that you get a larger voice that can coordinate with agencies that specifically focus on regions. And the dynamics that goes into it and how even though the implementation is different per country, but seeing similarities in terms of the urgency and vulnerabilities, it gives you an ecosystem of where each of the expertise are, how youth are able to help each other, taking aside the vulnerabilities that were presented in the first place.
I think just to add a little bit, I think the key thing over here is because ASEAN is very rich and very diverse in terms of demographic and culture. I think that's where we would need to leverage on each other because we don't have that local domestic context in different countries. And by working together to amplify the common things that we see, but as we go onto the ground, the local context, the different nuances that we then go to the ground and do things differently in different countries. I think that is what matters and why regional cooperation needs to be strengthened, right? There are certain things that we work together on a common platform and a common a level that we don't reinvent the wheel. But now as we go on to the ground and as we work on the different things, right, in our country itself, I think that's where the value add of the local organization would be and would play an important role. Yeah.
Thank you for the add-on, Andre. Due to the short amount of time, I'm going to let Natalie give her, her thoughts on what does cooperation look like and what does she want to see, and then add on her call to action, 30 seconds, then Andre call to action, 30 seconds, and then finally with Tonic with 30 seconds for, yeah. Thank you, Natalie. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jessai. I think everyone brought up amazing points. So I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to talk a little bit faster. But I think something about regional collaboration is that, with the whole ASEAN power grid, the whole region is going to be connected. And I think it is important to note that, we can't move forward as a region if we don't collaborate. That is simply the premise of the ASEAN Power Grid, right? That was why it took so long, and it's still in discussion. And that's why I think this is the opportune moment for us to actually come together as youth, as different youth organizations around the region, to come and share consensus in terms of what we want this joint regional future to look like, because that is where I think we can collaborate the most. I think my final call to action is simply for youth to get interested, to get involved in whatever way possible. I think that whole energy transition might look very scary, might look very complicated, but it isn't. I think it's something that Tony also pointed out, is looking at what you have in your own surroundings, in your own communities, and how you can contribute. Be it if you're undergraduate, if you're a working professional, you can always contribute and get to understand more about the energy transition within your country and also within the region. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Andre, 30 seconds for your call to action.
I think one key thing, right? A lot of the decision and policy making previously is mainly think, and then I plan, and then I talk, right? Now, as youth, as we shape the future of tomorrow, right? I mean, what we should do is really unite, collectively work together, act upon it, and really deliver results, be it big or small. We start from ourselves, and then those collective efforts and impact would then be aggregated at a country level, at a regional level. So no actions are too small. So start from yourself. Yep.
Mine probably would be very short. It's expanding the discussion to people outside of maybe it be your country, so at a regional scope, or beyond the people that are in your comfort zone. Expands also the action that people can take when it comes to influencing just energy transition. At the end of the day, energy is an everybody issue. We all use electricity, some form of energy, one way or another. Thus, it's a discussion that's meant not just for the technical side or for policymakers. It's everybody that has something to contribute to.
Love all the call to actions, all the comments today. I'd just like to thank everybody here today in the room, and also joining us online and the videos that we can see and rewatch our interventions as well. My name is Jitsai Santaputra. I am the co-founder of Youth for Energy in Southeast Asia. We're so happy today we were able to present our Clean Future project to everybody here. And if you guys want to get connected with the youth organizations that are working in energy, we have a variety in different countries. We have a regional one that we're running as well. So please, 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 get connected, see what we can do together. If they're on a CSR angle, if you want to do funding, you want to do projects, we really need a lot of funding to run these projects, and you have no idea how much difference that would make to the communities of the Philippines. We have the Indonesia as well. We have the islands, Thailand, we have the mountains in the north. The grid does not connect everywhere, despite it saying 100% electrification. That is not true, clearly, because there are still communities that are unelectrified, and that really changes people's lives. So if you guys want to get involved, please do reach out to organizations. I will help share all of organizations to the people here in the room, and as well in the comments of the DCCE Facebook page, where this video can be rewatched. Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you for being here. สวัสดีค่ะ Thank you panelists. Bye.